You know, after 40 years on this bench, I thought I had seen every kind of injustice that one human being could do to another. But on a Monday morning in September, an 18-year-old kid walked into my courtroom in handcuffs, accused of robbing a millionaire. The boy had no lawyer, no money, no one sitting behind him in the gallery, and the man accusing him had a $3,000 suit, a team of attorneys, and the kind of confidence that comes from a lifetime of people saying yes to everything he wants. On paper, this case was already decided before it started. But what happened in that courtroom, what those security cameras revealed, what the truth actually looked like when it finally came out. I have been doing this for 4 decades, and I have never, not once, been so angry and so moved in the same hour. Let me tell you exactly what happened, because this is a story about what it means to be honest in a world that punishes you for it. And it's a story about what happens when money thinks it can buy the truth. But before I get into this, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, because what I'm about to share with you is something that needs to be heard. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single word of this. I've been a municipal court judge in Newark, New Jersey since 1985. 40 years on this bench. My father was a janitor who cleaned office buildings at night so I could go to school during the day. He taught me one thing I never forgot. He said, "Son, a rich man's word and a poor man's word weigh the same on the scale of truth. Don't you ever forget that." I never have. And on that Monday morning, that lesson was about to be tested in a way I never expected. The case file landed on my desk the Friday before. The plaintiff was a man named Richard Davenport III. If you're from the Newark area, you might recognize the name. Davenport Development Group. Commercial real estate, shopping centers, office park, luxury, condominiums. The man was worth somewhere north of $400 million. He had buildings with his name on them in 3 states. He sat on the boards of 2 hospitals and a university. He was the kind of man who had a Wikipedia page and a PR team and friends who called him rich at charity galas, where the entry ticket cost more than most people make in a month. The defendant was a kid named Marcus Thompson, 18 years old, just graduated from Wequahic High School 3 months earlier, no criminal record, not even a parking ticket. He lived with his grandmother, Ida Thompson, in a 1-bedroom apartment on Hawthorne Avenue. His mother had died when he was 11. Cancer. His father had never been in the picture. His grandmother had raised him on her Social Security check and whatever she made doing alterations for the dry cleaner down the street. Marcus had been accepted to Essex County College on a partial scholarship. He was supposed to start classes in 2 weeks. He wanted to study engineering. He wanted to build things. And now he was sitting in a holding cell accused of grand theft, facing up to 5 years in prison because Richard Davenport III said this kid had stolen his wallet. I read the police report carefully. On Saturday, August 26th, at approximately 2:15 in the afternoon, Richard Davenport reported to Newark police that his wallet had been stolen while he was exiting a restaurant called Meridian on Ferry Street. The wallet, according to Davenport, contained $2,400 in cash, 3 credit cards, his driver's license, and a membership card to some private club in Manhattan. Davenport told police he had been approached by a young black male, approximately 18 years old, wearing a gray hoodie and jeans. He said the young man bumped into him on the sidewalk, and when he reached for his wallet, moments later, it was gone. Police located Marcus Thompson 4 blocks from the restaurant. Approximately 40 minutes later, he matched the general description. Gray hoodie, jeans, 18 years old, and he had Richard Davenport's wallet in his possession. Marcus was arrested on the spot. He told the officers he had found the wallet on the ground and was trying to return it. The officers noted his statement in the report, but charged him anyway. Because he had the wallet, and the rich man said it was stolen. That's how it works sometimes. I wish I could tell you it doesn't, but I've been doing this too long to pretend. When a man like Richard Davenport points his finger at a kid like Marcus Thompson, the system tends to believe the finger. Monday morning, September 11th, I walked into my courtroom and I saw the contrast before I heard a single word. On the left side, the plaintiff's table, Richard Davenport sat with two attorneys from one of the most expensive law firms in the state. He wore a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than Marcus's grandmother made in 3 months. His hair was silver and perfectly styled. His watch caught the light every time he moved. His wrist, he looked comfortable, the way powerful people look comfortable in rooms that were built to serve them. On the right side, Marcus Thompson sat alone. He was wearing khaki pants and a white button-down shirt that was slightly too big for him. His grandmother had probably bought it for him for this day. He had no attorney. He couldn't afford one, and he hadn't qualified for a public defender because of some bureaucratic technicality in the application process. His hands were on the table, and I could see them shaking from my bench. He was terrified. He was 18 years old, and he was sitting in a courtroom facing a felony charge, and he was completely, utterly alone. I looked at the gallery behind him. Empty, not a single person. I looked at the gallery behind Davenport. His wife was there, 2 associates from his company, a woman I later learned was his personal assistant. They filled a row like they were attending a board meeting. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not anger, not yet. Something older than anger. Something my father would have recognized. The feeling you get when you see the scales tipped before the weighing even start. I called the case. Davenport's lead attorney stood up first. His name was Gregory Holt, a senior partner at Holt, Bernstein, and Associate. He spoke the way expensive lawyers speak, smooth, precise, every word calibrated to build a narrative. He laid out the case with surgical efficiency. His client, Mr. Davenport, had been dining at Meridian Restaurant on Ferry Street. Upon exiting, he was approached and physically bumped by the defendant, Mr. Thompson. Within moments, Mr. Davenport realized his wallet was missing. Police were called. The defendant was apprehended 4 blocks away in possession of the wallet. The evidence, Holt said, was straightforward. The defendant had the wallet. The wallet belonged to Mr. Davenport. The only reasonable conclusion was theft. Holt sat down. Davenport nodded slightly, the way a man nods when his employee has performed well. I turned to Marcus. I said, "Mr. Thompson, you don't have legal representation today. I want to make sure you understand that you have the right to tell your side of this story. Take your time. Tell me what happened in your own words." Marcus stood up. His legs were unsteady and he gripped the edge of the table. He looked at me, and I could see him trying to find his courage. He was a kid who had never been in trouble, who had never stood in front of a judge, who had probably never spoken to a room of strangers, who held his future in their hand. He said, "Your Honor, I didn't steal anything. I found that wallet on the ground." I heard someone on Davenport's side exhale sharply, like they were already dismissing him. Marcus continued, "I was walking home from my job at the car wash on Market Street. I cut through Ferry Street because it's shorter. I was walking past that restaurant and I saw the wallet on the sidewalk just lying there next to the curb. I picked it up and I opened it because I was looking for an ID so I could return it." He paused and swallowed hard. "I saw the driver's license inside and I saw the address. It was a Livingston address. I don't have a car. I can't drive to Livingston. So I started walking toward the police precinct on South Orange Avenue, turn it in. That's the direction I was going when the officers stopped me. I was walking to the police station. I was trying to do the right thing." Gregory Holt stood up before Marcus even finished. He said, "Your Honor, with all due respect, the defendant was found 4 blocks away from the scene, moving in the opposite direction of the restaurant. If his intent was to return the wallet, why didn't he simply go back inside the restaurant? Why walk 4 blocks away with $2,400 in cash in his possession? Marcus looked at the attorney, and I could see the frustration and the fear battling on his face. He said, "I didn't know whose wallet it was. I found it on the sidewalk, not inside the restaurant. I didn't know it came from that restaurant. I was looking for a police station because my grandmother always taught me that if you find something that doesn't belong to you, you take it to the police." Holt smiled. It was a thin, practiced smile. He said, "Your Honor, my client has a very different recollection of events. Mr. Davenport clearly felt the defendant bump into him. The wallet was in the defendant's jacket. These are not the actions of a good Samaritan." I listened to both sides, and I felt the weight of this moment. On one hand, a powerful man with expensive lawyers telling me this kid was a thief. On the other hand, an 18-year-old with no record and no representation telling me he found a wallet and was trying to return it. The evidence was circumstantial. Marcus had the wallet. That was the only hard fact. Everything else was one man's word against another's. And then I asked the question that changed everything. I said, "Mr. Holt, the incident occurred on Ferry Street. Ferry Street is a commercial district. There are businesses on that block. Are there security cameras?" The courtroom went quiet. Holt paused. For the first time, his composure slipped just slightly. He said, "Your Honor, we were not able to obtain security footage in the time frame since the incident." I looked at him. I said, "You weren't able to obtain it, or you didn't try?" Holt said nothing. I looked at Marcus. I said, "Mr. Thompson, did you know there were cameras on that street?" Marcus shook his head. He said, "No, Your Honor, but if there are, they'll show the truth. I'm not lying. I picked that wallet up off the ground. I didn't touch that man. I've never even seen him before that day. I made my decision right then." I said, "I'm issuing a continuance on this case. I am ordering the Newark Police Department to obtain all available security camera footage from the businesses on the 200 block of Ferry Street, covering the hours of 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. on Saturday, August 26. We will reconvene in 2 weeks." Holt stood up immediately. He said, "Your Honor, my client is a respected member of this community. This delay is unnecessary and burdensome." I looked at him and I said, "Mr. Holt, your client is accusing an 18-year-old of a felony that could send him to prison and end his future before it starts. If the cameras show what your client says happened, then justice will be served. And if they don't, then justice will also be served. Either way, I want the truth, and I suspect the cameras have it. We're adjourned." I brought the gavel down, and I saw something in Marcus's eyes that I'll never forget. It wasn't relief exactly. It was the first flicker of hope he'd felt since the handcuffs went on. Now, let me pause here for just a second. I need to ask you something. Have you ever been accused of something you didn't do? Have you ever had someone with more power, more money, more influence point their finger at you and watched the whole world believe them instead of you? Leave me a comment, because I actually read them. And if you're feeling this story, if you can feel the injustice building the way I could, hit that like button for me. 2 weeks passed, the longest 2 weeks of Marcus Thompson's life, I'm sure. He couldn't sleep. His grandmother told me later that he barely ate. He sat in his room staring at the wall, convinced his life was over. His scholarship to Essex County College required a clean record. If he was convicted, the scholarship was gone. The future was gone. Everything his grandmother had sacrificed for, everything his mother had dreamed for him before she died, all of it gone because a rich man pointed at him and said he did something he didn't do. Meanwhile, I had my people working on those cameras. The police department obtained footage from 3 businesses on that block: a dry cleaner, a barbershop, and the restaurant itself, Meridian, which had a camera pointed directly at its front entrance and the sidewalk beyond. When the footage arrived at my office, I reviewed it privately in my chambers. I sat at my desk and I watched it on my computer screen. And what I saw made my blood boil in a way that 40 years on this bench has rarely achieve. September 25th. The courtroom was packed this time. Word had gotten out somehow. There were reporters in the back row. There were people from the neighborhood who had heard about Marcus's case. His grandmother was there this time, sitting right behind him, a tiny woman in her Sunday best with a Bible in her purse. She had taken the bus from Hawthorne Avenue, and she had brought 2 women from her church with her. Marcus wasn't alone anymore. Davenport was there with his attorneys again. Same suit, maybe a different one that cost the same. Same watch, same posture. But I noticed something different about him that day. A tightness around his jaw, a stiffness in the way he sat. Gregory Holt leaned over and whispered something to him, and Davenport nodded. But the nod was sharp, agitated. They knew the footage had been obtained, and I suspect they had a pretty good idea of what it showed. I called the courtroom to order. I said, "Before we proceed, this court has obtained security camera footage relevant to the events of August 26th. I am going to play this footage in its entirety. I want both parties and everyone in this courtroom to see exactly what happened on that sidewalk." Holt stood up. He said, "Your Honor, my client objects to the presentation of this footage without prior review by our legal team." I looked at him and I said, "Mr. Holt, your legal team had 2 weeks to obtain this footage independently. You chose not to. This court obtained it in the interest of justice. Objection overruled. Sit down." He sat down. Raymond set up the screen, and I played the footage. It was from Meridian's own security camera, mounted above the front door, pointing outward at the sidewalk and the street. The image was clear, high definition. Timestamp. At 2:07 p.m., the footage showed Richard Davenport exiting the restaurant. He was alone. He stepped onto the sidewalk and reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out his phone. He looked at it, typed something, and put it back. Then he began walking to the left toward where his car was presumably parked. At 2:08 p.m., as Davenport was walking, something fell from his coat. It was small and dark. It hit the sidewalk and slid slightly toward the curb. Davenport did not notice. He kept walking. He turned the corner and disappeared from the frame. The wallet had fallen out of his own pocket. It was right there on the camera, clear as day. Nobody touched him. Nobody bumped him. Nobody was within 10 feet of him. The wallet simply fell out, and he didn't notice. At 2:11 p.m., 3 minutes later, Marcus Thompson walked into the frame from the right. He was walking with his head down, hands in the pockets of his hoodie. He was clearly just passing through. He wasn't following anyone. He wasn't looking for anything. He was walking home from work. At 2:12 p.m., Marcus stopped. He looked down at the ground. He bent over and picked something up, the wallet. He stood there for a moment, looked around like he was checking to see if anyone had dropped it, and then he opened it. He looked through it, pulled something out, looked at it, put it back. The driver's license, exactly what he had told me. He was looking for an ID. Then Marcus closed the wallet, put it in his jacket pocket, and continued walking. But here's the part that destroyed me. Here's the part that made me want to reach through the screen and shake Richard Davenport by his $3,000 lapel. Marcus didn't continue walking in the direction he had been going. He turned around. He turned around and started walking the other way, back toward Ferry Street, back in the direction of the police precinct on South Orange Avenue. The footage ended there because he walked out of the camera's range. But the direction was unmistakable. This kid found a stranger's wallet, looked for the ID, couldn't figure out how to get it to the address on the license, and turned around to walk to the police station. He was doing exactly what he said he was doing. Exactly. Every single word he had told me was the truth. The courtroom was dead silent when the footage ended. I could hear the clock ticking. I could hear someone's phone buzz in the back row. I could hear Richard Davenport's expensive shoe tap nervously against floor. I looked at Davenport. His face had changed. The confidence was gone. The power was gone. He looked like a man who had just watched his own lie play out in high definition in front of a room full of people. His jaw was tight. His eyes were darting between his attorneys. Holt was leaning back in his chair with his hand over his mouth. I turned to Marcus. He was sitting perfectly still. Tears were running down his face, but he wasn't making a sound. His grandmother had her hand on his shoulder from behind the railing. She was whispering something to him that I couldn't hear, but I like to think it was, "I told you the truth would come out." I let the silence sit for a long moment. I wanted everyone in that room to feel it, the weight of what had almost happened, the weight of an innocent kid nearly going to prison because a powerful man couldn't admit he had dropped his own wallet. I said, "Mr. Davenport, please stand up." He stood. His attorneys flanked him, but they looked uncomfortable. They knew what was coming. I said, "Mr. Davenport, the footage this court has just reviewed tells a very clear story, and it is not the story you told the police on August 26th. The footage shows your wallet falling from your own coat as you exited the restaurant. Nobody bumped you. Nobody touched you. Nobody approached you. You dropped your wallet and you didn't notice. The footage then shows Mr. Thompson finding your wallet on the ground 3 minutes after you had left the frame. It shows him examining its contents, presumably looking for identification. And it shows him turning around and walking in the direction of the nearest police precinct. Mr. Thompson was not stealing your wallet, Mr. Davenport. He was returning it. The courtroom was absolutely still. What troubles me, Mr. Davenport, is not that you lost your wallet. People lose things. What troubles me is what happened next. You told the police that a young man bumped into you and stole it. That did not happen. The camera proves it did not happen. You described a young black male in a gray hoodie, not because you saw this young man take your wallet, but because you assumed he did. You assumed that because a young black man was in the vicinity, he must be the one who took it. And on the strength of that assumption, you filed a police report, pressed charges, and set in motion a chain of events that nearly destroyed this young man's life. Davenport's attorney started to stand. I held up my hand. I said, "Mr. Holt, sit down." "I am not finished," I continued. "Marcus Thompson is 18 years old. He has never been in trouble with the law. He was 3 weeks away from starting college on a scholarship that required a clean record. He has been sitting in this system for a month, terrified, unable to sleep, unable to eat, watching his future evaporate because of an accusation that this footage proves was completely and entirely false. He did nothing wrong. He did everything right. He found a wallet that did not belong to him, and he immediately tried to return it. And for that act of honesty, he was handcuffed, arrested, charged with a felony, and forced to sit in this courtroom and defend himself against a lie." I looked directly at Davenport. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Mr. Davenport, I want you to look at that young man." He didn't move. "Mr. Davenport, look at him." Slowly, Richard Davenport turned his head and looked at Marcus Thompson. That young man's mother died when he was 11. His grandmother raised him alone. She worked every day of her life so that he could have a chance, and he earned that chance. He earned a scholarship. He earned a clean record. He earned the right to walk down a public street without being accused of a crime he didn't commit simply because of how he looked. And you nearly took all of that away from him, not because of what he did, because of what you assumed. Courtroom erupted in murmurs. Raymond called for quiet. I picked up my gavel and I said, "All charges against Marcus Thompson are dismissed permanently. This court finds that Mr. Thompson acted with honesty and integrity, and that the accusation against him was unfounded and unsupported by the evidence. Mr. Thompson, you are free to go. You owe this court nothing. Your record remains clean." I brought the gavel down. Marcus collapsed forward onto the table. His grandmother was on her feet, pushing past the railing, reaching for him. She wrapped her arms around him and held him, and they both cried right there in front of everyone. The women from the church were crying. People in the gallery were crying. I saw a reporter wiping her eyes, but I wasn't done. I turned back to Davenport. I said, "Mr. Davenport, I am referring this matter to the county prosecutor's office for review of potential charges, including filing a false police report and perjury. I am also recommending that the police department review its procedures for how accusations of this nature are investigated before charges are filed." A man's word, regardless of his wealth or status, should not be enough to put handcuffs on an innocent person without corroborating evidence. Davenport's face went white. Holt stood up and said, "Your Honor, my client maintains that he genuinely believed and I cut him off." I said, "Mr. Holt, what your client genuinely believed is irrelevant. What your client told the police is a matter of record, and what the camera shows is a matter of fact. Facts don't care about beliefs. We're done here." I stood up and walked to my chambers. I closed the door and I sat down and I put my head in my hands because I kept thinking about what would have happened if those cameras didn't exist. What would have happened if it had stayed as one man's word against another's, except one man had $400 million and a legal team and the other had a too big shirt and a grandmother praying in the gallery. I know what would have happened, and it makes me sick. Now, let me pause again. If this story is getting to you, if you understand how close this came to going the other way, hit that like button. Share this video because there are kids like Marcus sitting in courtrooms right now without cameras to save them, and that should keep all of us up at night. After the hearing, something happened that I didn't expect. Marcus and his grandmother were walking out of the courthouse when Richard Davenport came out a side door. His attorneys were gone. His wife was gone. He was alone, and he walked directly toward Marcus and Ida Thompson. I wasn't there for this part, but Marcus told me about it later. He said Davenport stopped in front of them and stood there for a moment without saying anything. His grandmother stepped in front of Marcus instinctively, the way she'd probably been protecting him his whole life. Then Davenport said, "I'm sorry." That was it. 2 words. But Marcus said the way he said it, the way his voice broke on the second word, it didn't sound like a man who had been coached by his lawyers. It sounded like a man who had just watched footage of himself ruining an innocent kid's life and couldn't live with what he saw. Marcus's grandmother looked at him for a long time. Then she said, "Sorry is a start, but that boy lost a month of his life. He lost sleep, he lost weight, he almost lost his future. Sorry doesn't give that back." Davenport nodded, took his hand and said, "Come on, baby, let's go home. It's over." But it wasn't over, not even close. 2 weeks later, Marcus received a letter at his grandmother's apartment. It was on expensive stationery with a monogram at the top. It was from Richard Davenport. Marcus's grandmother opened it because Marcus didn't want to touch it. Inside was a handwritten letter and a check. The letter said, "Mr. Thompson, I have spent the last 2 weeks unable to sleep. I have watched that security footage in my mind 1,000 times. I watched myself walk away, and I watched you pick up my wallet and turn around to do the right thing. And then I watched myself tell the police a story that wasn't true. I didn't lie intentionally. I want you to know that. I genuinely believed I had been bumped. I genuinely believed my wallet had been stolen. But when I search my conscience honestly, I have to ask myself why I was so sure it was you. And I don't like the answer. I have spent my entire life building things, buildings, businesses, a reputation, but I nearly destroyed the most important thing there is, a young man's future. I can never undo what I did to you, but I want to try to make it right. Enclosed is a check to cover the full cost of your education at Essex County College. And if you choose to transfer to a 4-year university afterward, that will be covered as well. This is not charity. This is not guilt money. This is an investment in a young man who showed more integrity on a sidewalk in Newark than I have shown in 40 years of business. I picked up a wallet full of cash and tried to find its owner. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are. I am ashamed of what I assumed about you, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the lesson you taught me. Check was for $200,000. Marcus sat at the kitchen table and stared at that check for an hour. His grandmother sat across from him, and neither of them spoke. Finally, Marcus said, "Grandma, What do I do? And Ida Thompson, this tiny woman who had raised a grandson on Social Security and alteration work and prayers, said, "You cash that check, you go to school, you become the engineer you told your mama you'd be, and you build something good." Marcus started at Essex County College that semester. He didn't miss a single class. He made the dean's list his first year. 2 years later, he transferred to NJIT, the New Jersey Institute of Technology, on a full scholarship that Davenport's money and his own grades had earned him. He graduated last spring with a degree in civil engineering. But here's what gets me. Here's the part that makes this story more than just a courtroom drama. Marcus didn't just take the money and move on. He called Richard Davenport. He called the man who had almost sent him to prison. And he said, "Mr. Davenport, I want to show you something." He invited Davenport to his graduation, and Davenport came. He sat in the audience at NJIT's commencement ceremony, and he watched Marcus Thompson walk across that stage and accept his degree. And when Marcus's name was called, Davenport stood up and applauded. Marcus's grandmother was sitting 3 rows in front of Davenport, and she didn't know he was there until after the ceremony when Marcus brought them together. Marcus told me what happened next. He said his grandmother looked at Davenport and Davenport looked at her, and neither of them said anything for a long time. Then Ida Thompson extended her hand and said, "Thank you for keeping your word. My grandson is an engineer because you made it right." Davenport took her hand and said, "Your grandson is an engineer because you raised him right. I just wrote a check." After graduation, Marcus and Davenport started a foundation together. They called it Second Look. The mission is to provide free legal representation for young people who are accused of crimes without sufficient evidence. They fund independent investigations, camera footage retrieval, and expert testimony for defendants who can't afford it. In 3 years, Second Look has helped overturn 29 wrongful charges. 29 young people who would have been convicted if someone hadn't looked at the evidence a second time. Marcus is now a structural engineer at a firm in Newark. He's building things in the same neighborhood where he grew up. He told me last year that every time he drives past the ShopRite on Hawthorne Avenue, he passes the bus stop where his grandmother used to wait in the rain. And he thinks about the fact that his entire life almost ended on a sidewalk because a powerful man made an assumption. Ida Thompson is 81 now. She still goes to church every Sunday. She still does alterations for the dry cleaner. And she still carries a Bible in her purse. She told me once that she never doubted for a moment that the truth would come out. She said, "I raised that boy right. God knows it. The cameras knew it. It just took the rest of the world a little longer to catch up." Look, I need to ask you for a favor. If this story is resonating with you, if you believe that justice should be blind to wealth and status and the color of a person's skin, I need you to share this. Send it to someone who works in law enforcement. Send it to someone who has ever been falsely accused. Send it to someone who needs to be reminded that honesty, even when no one is watching, even when the world punishes you for it, is always worth it. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the other stories I'm going to share, and leave me a comment telling me what you think. What would you have done if you found that wallet? That's what I mean when I say our choices matter. Marcus Thompson made a choice on a sidewalk. He chose honesty. He chose to do the right thing when nobody was looking, and nobody would have known the difference if he just kept walking. And that choice, that one small moment of integrity, ended up changing his life, changing Richard Davenport's life, and building a foundation that has saved 29 other young people from the same injustice. And Richard Davenport made a choice too. He made a terrible one first, but then he made a better one. He looked at himself honestly. He wrote a letter and a check. He showed up at a graduation. He partnered with the young man he had wronged to make sure it wouldn't happen to anyone else. That doesn't erase what he did, but it proves that people can change, that even when you get it wrong, horribly, devastatingly wrong, you can choose to make it right. If this story meant something to you, if you believe in truth and second chances, do me a favor, that like button, and subscribe to this channel. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message, and check out the next video on your screen. I've got another incredible story from my courtroom that you won't believe. I've been on this bench for 40 years because I believe something simple. The truth matters. Every person who stands before me deserves to have the truth heard, whether they're wearing a $3,000 suit or a too big shirt their grandmother bought them. Because we're not just enforcing rules, we're protecting people. And if we can't protect an honest kid from a powerful man's assumption, then what are we even doing here? Thank you for listening to my story. God bless you. Take care of each other. And the next time you find something that doesn't belong to you, do what Marcus Thompson did. Do the right thing. You never know who's watching.